There's a specific kind of government project that almost never ends well. It's the build-out of an internal enforcement machine whose job is to identify, track, detain, and remove a politically vulnerable population, especially when the pipeline runs through administrative process instead of criminal courts, especially when oversight is weak or treated like an obstacle. It starts with a promise. This will keep the country safe. It ends with a different reality. This is what the country is now. So let's define the pattern carefully, because history repeats it with uncomfortable consistency. When I say ICE-like, I'm not doing the lazy thing, just swapping in a scary name and calling it analysis. ICE-like means a specific function set. Interior enforcement aimed at a low-power population. Detention-first logistics that don't require full due process at the front end. Mass identification, papers, registries, databases, surveillance, and now increasingly, AI. A culture where suspicion is rewarded institutionally. And mission creep. The definition expands beyond the original rationale because the infrastructure makes expansion easy. And here's the part people miss. When a state builds this, it doesn't just capture people. It captures the state itself. It trains itself to treat rights as friction and human beings as inventory. You don't have to take that as ideology. You can take it as history. If you want the cleanest demonstration of what status policing does to a society, look at apartheid-era pass laws. The state didn't need to declare itself evil. It built a bureaucracy that required Black South Africans to carry documents, produce them on demand, and face arrest if they couldn't. That's not law enforcement in any ordinary sense. That's a machine of domination, one that trains everyone living under it to accept routine coercion as normal life. Here's the first lesson. Once a government normalizes tracking, status checks, and administrative mass arrest, it rewires its relationship to the public. Rights stop feeling like rights. They start feeling like permissions. And yes, there's a reason the cynical line lands so hard when you hear it out loud. Peter Thiel once said, quote, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible." That's not a policy memo. That's a worldview. Now, Americans like to tell themselves mass detention is something that happens elsewhere, something that happens to other people, in other countries, under other flags. But our own history says otherwise. After Pearl Harbor, the United States built a detention pipeline for so-called enemy aliens. People were arrested across the country, often on thin suspicion, sometimes on nothing more than ancestry, associations, or fear. And what matters here is not only that it happened, it's how it happened. Administrative hearings, non-court panels, cases built from files, a process designed to feel procedural instead of violent. That's the second lesson. When a government gets comfortable detaining people through administrative channels in the name of security, it creates a precedent. And precedents don't stay in their original box. Now let's say the quiet part out loud. The danger isn't only what the paperwork says. It's the culture the paperwork trains. Once you build an agency rewarded for finding, flagging, and removing people, suspicion becomes virtue. Efficiency becomes morality. And due process becomes a speed bump to pave over. Not every internal enforcement system becomes a full secret police state, but the direction has a familiar gravitational pull. Historically, the endpoint is an institution that exists to maintain political and social control. And once an institution is built around control, it doesn't naturally drift toward restraint. It drifts toward reach. Now we hit the modern accelerant. Data systems make mission creep cheap. Historically, coercive systems hit limits: paperwork, manpower, logistics. Today the bottleneck is smaller because software scales and databases don't get tired. That's why promises aren't the point. Capacity is the point. What can the system do once it exists? How easily can today's target list become tomorrow's? And now we get to the line some people want to dismiss as too much. Fine. Let's frame it precisely. When you normalize a pipeline where the government can detain, warehouse, and remove people through administrative machinery, when oversight is resisted, when accountability is delayed, you are building the kind of system that history later recognizes as a precondition for atrocity. So yes, I'm going to keep the biting wording, and I'm also going to be clear that this is a warning about trajectory, because the trajectory matters. This is the same process happening now, a Department of Justice blessing a systematic detention pipeline for whoever is declared unacceptable. And if you want the bluntest version of the fear, here it is. In my view, that's how you end up with what you called Bondi's preamble to gas chambers. Not because someone files a memo titled gas chambers. Because the machine gets built, and then the machine goes looking for new uses. That's the third lesson. Internal enforcement machines expand because their success metrics are built around control, not justice. And once you add powerful surveillance tools, once you can identify, match, and map people at scale, the question stops being, would they? It becomes, who decides and what stops them? And yes, there are people openly selling the moral trade. Palantir's CEO came out and said, quote, "Surveillance state is preferable to China winning the AI race." In plain language, that's not a statement about a foreign threat. That's an argument for building a domestic capability, one that can be turned inward. Here's the part people always want to believe won't happen here. Once a coercive machine exists, it doesn't stay loyal to the reasons it was created. It finds new categories, new enemies, new exceptions. And that's why the outcome is almost never positive for citizens over the long arc of time. Because these systems create a moral exception zone inside the country. A group with fewer rights becomes socially acceptable to harm. Oversight becomes inconvenient and starts getting resisted. The public gets trained to accept cruelty as a form, a checkbox, a workflow. Here's the hard truth. Interior enforcement machines built on detention and mass identification don't just remove people. They normalize coercion. They grow a culture of suspicion. They degrade rights, and they teach the state that it can hurt people administratively, then call it order. You don't build a machine for cages and expect it to make a society freer. You build it, and then you spend decades trying to remember what freedom felt like before the machine became ordinary. And that brings me to the closing prediction. As more Republicans finally grasp what the machine has actually built and start sounding the alarm, the establishment will drop the pro-rights costume the moment it becomes inconvenient. When enough people on the right recognize the monster they helped create and try to restrain it, the monster won't apologize. It will redirect. It will relabel. It will expand its mandate. If that machine ever turns inward toward broader populations, it won't arrive with slogans. It will arrive with forms, with regulations, with court filings, with armed enforcement. Don't waste time arguing with me about it now. Just remember you read this if the day comes when people are standing in lines, signing papers, and surrendering protections to whatever the system is renamed once its mandate expands far beyond immigration. Because that's the pattern. It doesn't stay contained.